doing a video today on basically what I'm going to call the dark mother archetype. And I don't want this to, like, I did a video, for example, called the sacred or divine feminine, like, in storytelling, what they try to write in as, like, attributes of, like, the good woman in it. And this isn't, I wouldn't say this video is about, like, the reverse of that. Like, I think there's, like, a dark feminine attribute that isn't necessarily the same as the dark mother archetype, although there's probably some overlap with those two things. First, you know, when I first found this out, I was kind of taken away by it. If you look up the word matrix, right, its actual initial definition was, you know, this is a cool website. Just a quick little side note. If you go to Google, type in 1828 dictionary from the year 1828. There's a lot of words you can look up that you can see how their definition changed in the last 200 years, and some will be really weird. Anyways, noun, Latin, matrix from mater or mother. So we already have this over. You know, when most people hear the word matrix, they think of the movie with Keanu Reeves and, you know, an artificial dream world. And you're going to see why it's called that. That's not an accident. That's 100% on purpose. The womb, the cavity in which the fetus of an animal is formed and nourished till its birth. Okay, I'll just read them all. A mold, the cavity in which anything is formed and which gives it shape as the matrix of a type. The place where anything is formed or produced as the matrix of metals. In dyeing, the 5 simple colors, black, white, blue, red, and yellow, of which all the rest are composed. There you have it. The matrix meaning mother, and the womb, the cavity in which anything is formed. So, you know, one of the cool things about, or one of the, I don't know if it's cool, but one of the things about symbols, basically, is that they principally remain true or similar fundamentally across multiple different levels of analysis. And what I mean by that is, like, on one level, it's like the matrix is the womb. So, like, you can think of this thing as the act of being born itself, being put into the flesh. Like, as soon as you enter the flesh, your soul hits the body, you're in the matrix. But then you can also think of the matrix as, like, a governmental system, and that's a whole nother level of analysis. And, like, you know, there's a lot to be said about, like, the soul, like, the level of analysis of you basically being in, like, what, you know, like a flesh prison. That's a pretty dark view of life itself, but there's a lot of, like, occult and, like, religious teachings to back that up. And, you know, even in Christianity, outside of, like, the occult or whatever, like, in most religions, they'll teach you, you know, they'll set up, like, a rivalry in their language between, like, the flesh and the body, or the flesh and the spirit, the temporal and the eternal. You know what I mean? The things of, you know, even Christ is like, I am not of this world, I'm from above, you know what I mean? Things like that. So, I don't want you to think that, you know, this life is a prison, and then you could go into the carbon, you know, it's hexagonal shape, and we're carbon-based life, and it's 666 protons, electrons, and whatever, all that stuff. But, anyways, I'm just telling you that this whole matrix idea is going to be pretty consistent across different levels. And I'm not really going to focus too much on the fact that, like, your soul is in your body. Like, you know, maybe for another video, but for now, we're going to focus on the aspect of it being motherly. Speaking of different levels of analysis, like, let's take the word matrix. You know, I'm going into this pretty unorganized, like, as I usually do, and this isn't all fresh in my mind, but, like, take the word matrix, okay? So it's in that movie, you know, sure, it's a dream world set up by aliens or whatever, or robots to like siphon energy off of humanity, and like maybe there are some entities that are doing something like that, but like beyond that, beyond like some demonic entity or whatever, there's people that like the Matrix. There's some that aren't even aware of its existence, but Cypher, you know, he wants to be in the Matrix. He says, you know, plug me back in, I want to be a movie star, I don't care that the steak isn't real, it tastes good type stuff. So, like, I'm trying to point out what would compel mankind itself without the... I mean, I don't even know if you could say it's without influence from some other realm, because I think that does play a role. But mankind itself would be encouraged or motivated to build a matrix system because life is hard, there's suffering, there's pain. You know, it's like escapism, if you want to encapsulate it. Like, why would someone, you know, watch TV and play games and stuff all the time? Like, it's a form of escapism. And even the word, even the console, for example, Xbox, I'm going to do a video on X symbolism. It's literally, in my opinion, they're mocking you occultically, and like, and not only does the symbol matches up with what people use, and I own an Xbox, but like the symbol matches up with what people use that device for, which is primarily like escapism. I'm not, like, I love video games, I love storytelling, but it can be, you know, unhealthy. Why the female association with this Matrix thing? Because that's what I'm trying to focus on in this video. Why the feminine association? And if you think about how, you know, like, in my own life, for example, one time, this is a dumb example, this is a very dumb example, but it's still important. Like, my dog crapped in the house. My dad put the dog outside, threw her outside, he was mad at her, whatever, and wanted to leave her out there for a little bit as like punishment. My mom felt bad way too quickly and didn't want the dog to be punished, which was being left outside for a little bit. So, like, the mom is so caring that it wants to, like, save people from the consequences of their own actions, and in doing that, she's actually doing them a disservice, because they're not learning right from wrong necessarily, and they're not learning to change, and they're not learning to do things for themselves. You know, Sigmund Freud called it the, what is it, Oedipal? The Oedipal mother, and it's basically what I just said. It's like the devouring mother, that's another way you could call it. It's like the mom that, and I'm not, I love my mom, okay? No disrespect to her at all, but like, this is something that hits close to home with me, personally, and it's like, she's so caring, which I do believe it comes from like a weird form of love. I do. Like, I don't think it's necessarily always like evilly motivated, like you're gonna see in some other examples I have. I do think it's like love that is motivating it in some weird way, but it's like a twisted form. And like, you know, when you do everything for someone, they don't learn how to do things on their own, and you like hinder their independence and you hinder their growth, and you basically, you know, keep them in the womb. You know, remember, like, you've heard people say, like, cut the umbilical cord, like, you know, I don't know, that must make sense to you guys, you know. And, you know, on a governmental, we're talking about like a household, like I'm telling you, it holds true across multiple levels of analysis. Well, think about like what people call an overbearing government, or like, for example, like they call it the nanny state. There it is again with the association with the female, and it's a governmental system that gives everyone so many handouts that they become dependent on the state to do anything. They don't have and they end up basically, sure, maybe there's just some security, even though those systems usually fall apart because they're not sustainable, because people lose their spark and their inspiration and their motivation. But you end up losing your freedom. You lose your autonomy as an individual because you're dependent on them. You're always under her rule now. And in one of my Saturn videos, I'm going to do a bunch more Saturn stuff, and I do believe this Matrix thing, and the cube, and the Saturn, they're all the same thing. For example, go look up the music video. This is just one example. I could probably literally, not exaggerating. Some examples are not so profound. Some are very, you know, like mind-blowing. I could probably give you, no exaggeration, 100 examples of this cube Saturn stuff, and they're all overlapping. But anyways, if you look up the Dead Mouse, I don't even like this music necessarily, but the EDM producer, Dead Mouse, and type in Saturn after his name, he has a music video where it's a technological cube, and it's called Saturn, or it's called Matrix, one of the two, and it's like a cube with like binary code running down it, and there's that whole technology aspect to this too. But you know, you could call it a simulation. People use technology to escape. There's definitely a technological component to this, but it's not limited to technology. It's like a force of nature itself, or like a force within people. But he knows whatever, like, you know, whatever that, and he, you know, oh my god, he goes on stage with the cube all the time. He calls his audience the Horde, which is like, that's another association you'll see with the cube and the Saturn thing, is like a hive mind, like unity, collectivism, right? And he calls them the Horde, which is almost like another word for legion. Like in the Bible, he was saying, you know, we are legion, for we are many. There's no distinction between each individual. There's no separation. They're all unified and they have one brain. That's not a good thing. This is unity in the most twisted, messed up sense possible. There's no like common understanding. It's like just like erasing individuality and like mushing everyone together. And I mean, in my opinion, that's not good. And if you think about a governmental system that talks like that, it would be communism. And they have the, and not that I'm trying to inject you into like a left-right paradigm, but this Saturn stuff politically would be like a communist setup. And the hammer and sickle, the, you know, I've talked about it, why the sickle's on there, the sickle being a Saturn thing. Anyways, you know, I hope that makes sense where I'm coming from, why it has this mom-female association with it. And even the word, it looks Latin matrix from matter, almost sounds like it's literally missing a T, and then you have the word matter, which again goes back into like, you know, the level of analysis that is viewing it from a perspective of like you being in your physical body, literally is being like, you're in the matrix from the moment you're in here, like, let alone like like an oppressive city setup or something like that. So this is that movie Coraline. So I took the picture. This is in this movie. It's like a Pixar horror movie or a Disney horror movie, and this girl, Coraline Jones, not her. This is what's known as the other mother. This is like the daughter. She's in this. She's dissatisfied with her real life. She runs away to this dream world. So that's you'll see that a lot. And she meets this duplicates of her family, but like the only difference is they have that black button in the eye, which I don't know exactly what to make out of that. You know, feel free to chime in on that. But one of the lines she says, which is basically encapsulates what this is, or at least one component to it, is Coraline, I took this quote, and she says, she's got this whole world, she's describing the other mother, she's got this whole world where everything's better, the food, the garden, the neighbors, but it's all a trap. And exactly, it's, you know, everything you want isn't always good for you. Actually, most of the time, the things that you want are not good for you. That's why, in my opinion, you need, like, shit, like, you need God, you need direction, you need, like, service to something higher than yourself, which is why I don't, you know, basically I don't mess with Satanism, which I do think Satanism plays a hefty role in this type of mentality, man. You know, the words like discipline and, like, temperance and, like, restraint wouldn't exist if your desires and motivations were always 100% in line with the things that you needed to do. Otherwise, those words wouldn't even exist. Like, what do you mean? Of course I'm always going to eat my vegetables, or of course I'm always going to exercise, or of course I'm always going to do the work, because that's what I want to do. So I don't need to be disciplined about it, because what's discipline? You know what I mean? I hope that makes sense. So what I'm trying to point out to here is, like, the devil, like, can be very tempting and alluring and accommodating. Like, you can have whatever you like, that T.I. song or whatever, you can have whatever you like, if that's even T.I., I don't know, but like, you can't have whatever you like without consequence, man. That's a bad thing to teach people, it really is, and you can't do whatever you want and have, you know, have everything fall into place for you. It's just not how reality works. And this other mother is like shielding you. This dark mother archetype is like protecting you in a way. I mean, they view it as protection from reality, like from the truth, and like that's not good. You know how I feel like it's motivated by love and whatnot. In this movie, it seems to be more nefarious because she's actually luring children into this dream world so that she can like siphon off their souls and like trap them there forever, which she's actually like a very demonic thing. This is like, she doesn't even really look like this. She looks like a spider, which you could maybe make something out of that, like getting caught in a web and all that stuff. But you know, that's more akin to like the Matrix, Keanu Reeves Matrix, where it was created by someone else to siphon off your energy, rather than like created by you yourself or by like your mom to protect you from reality. Although I don't know. I hope that makes sense. I don't even know if that's worth making a distinction about. Let's move on to the next one. So this is somebody talking about the movie. Watched this movie 1,000 times with my daughter. Loves it and watched it over and over again. The eyes are the window. I think this is their opinion on why the eyes in the other world are black like that. The eyes are the window to the soul, and once she has your eyes, she has your soul. The other 3 children let the mother sew buttons into their eyes, and she was able to keep them in the other world. In the original book, the mother eats the 3 children, and their spirits are trapped. The children warn Coraline not to let her sew buttons in her eyes, and Coraline helps free their souls at the end. I don't think there's really anything deeper in the meaning than that. If Coraline lets the mother sew the buttons into her eyes, then she is becoming compliant, and accepting of the new world she's in. Yeah, that's actually, as I was reading that, I was thinking to myself, yeah, okay, so the kid has to agree to have the buttons sewn in. So that, I mean, who knows what else you could take away from this, but it could be symbolic of the level of the consent that you have to give. You know, the devil needs you to sign the contract. Dracula needs your permission to walk in the house in the old stories. The vampire needs, like, to be invited in type stuff. And, you know, there's some truth to that. Like, I don't know, I guess people really can force their will on you, but to a large extent, you know, you have to give up your freedom. And to think about it in any other way is already kind of admitting that you're powerless. So even if it is a farce that you don't really have a choice, it's better to believe that and like try and resist than it is to just say, oh, I don't actually ever have a choice about anything, so I'll just give up now. Like, you know, I'm getting a little off topic here, but like sometimes you have to think about truth practically. Like, I think that's a pragmatist approach. You have to think of like knowledge or truth, and sometimes as their tool-like capability. Like, can believing that you have no choice actually serve you well? Like, you know, at least in this situation, probably not. So, you know, just keep that in mind. Gaiman spoke about the significance of the buttons in a series of interviews. In the universe, the buttons indicate, oh, here we go, like I just was saying, indicate acceptance of the other world. It seems like Other Mother would have Coraline if she just hadn't insisted on sewing buttons on her eyes. Why didn't she just let that one go? You'd have to ask her. I think this is the author. That's definitely part of it. Coraline has to say yes. When I was writing it, I liked that's another thing, being able to say no. And that's another attribute of like the dark mother, always saying yes, never being able to say no, always giving you what you want, what you want, but not what you need, basically. You know, not allowing correction to take place. It liked the idea that Coraline was going to have to give into this thing. There's a point where you give in Either you give in because you are attracted by all the beauty, or you give in because you're terrified. In neither case does Coraline give in. She's smart and keeps fighting. So, right there, man, that's perfect. I'm not saying that's all there is, but that's two ways you could look at, like, why someone would want to run away into a dream and, like, continue to give in to escapism. Attracted by all the beauty, the promise of, like, you know, there's a scene, right, like I was talking about Matrix, Cypher's eating that steak. He's like, you know what? When he's making the deal with Smith, he's like, you know what? I don't care that this steak isn't real. You know, I'll plug me in, whatever. He doesn't care. And then he's eating like a nice fake steak, and then it cuts to like Neo in the real world, and he's like eating slop, you know. And it's just like sometimes, you know, the truth isn't pretty. Sometimes it's not convenient because it usually places responsibility on your shoulders. Because that's primarily, I would say, why people run away from the truth. It usually indicates that you need to do something to live up to your potential, to change, all that stuff. And, you know, that's kind of scary, which goes into the fear thing. Anyways, make of that what you will. Hope this makes sense so far, guys. Okay, this is kind of a gross example. I'm not going to read the, you know, Urban Dictionary definition here, but, or at least the example they give. And sorry for the vulgar aspect of it, but we were talking about the matrix being the womb, literally, where you're formed, and, like, the box or the cube. I've talked about cube symbolism a lot. I'm going to probably do a video on it where I give you guys, like, literally 50, 60 examples. And at the end of that, I don't know how any rational, even if you don't completely get it, which I'm sure I don't completely get it, even if you don't completely get it, I don't see how any, like, honest person could think that this isn't, like, a thing that's taking place. You know, or it's just, like, conspiracy babble. I don't know how at the end, if after I show you what I have, I don't know how a sane person, an honest person, could just dismiss everything I'm going to show them. Like I said, the box, the cube, which is the matrix, which is Saturn, female genitalia, usually just used in a derogatory manner. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard, I don't hear it all the time or even really commonly at all, but I have heard of a woman's genitals being referred to as her box before. And I just thought that was quite, like, ironic that, you know, the matrix is the womb and then her stuff's being called a box. Or a cube, more accurately. That's all I have to say about that, though. This is where it's going to get a little more abstract. Really, I said all, like, the primary, like, I feel like I've touched on the key points that I want to touch on already. Like, what it means to you in real life. And now we're going to get a little more abstract. I've never played this game. I think this is from Dark Souls 1 or 3. I've only played Dark Souls 2. So, which is the one that everyone hates for whatever reason. It's not the point, though. This is from one of those games. And it says, Dark Sun Gwendolyn. So sun as in, like, the sun and sky. Dark Sun Gwendolyn. So Gwendolyn was the last-born son of Lord Gwen, and the only true remaining deity to guard Anor Londo. He was raised as a daughter. Due to his strong affiliation with the moon's power, he uses the illusion of the Princess Guinevere to help him to hide his repulsive appearance. So, you know, I don't know if I'm going to be able to tie this to the Matrix aspect. I don't know what this character does in the series, if she has, like, some kind of, like, thing that's going on that relates to the other stuff that I've talked about, where she uses, like, deception or, like, you know, or, like, or her lore being that of one that has to do with, like, being overbearing and overprotective in the sense. So I don't know if there's any of that parallels, but what I want to point out is Dark Sun. What does that remind you of? A black sun, which I've told you a million times. The black sun is a satanic symbol. It's Saturn. It's a solar eclipse. The dark sun, the black star, the dark star, the all names for it, is Saturn. And Saturn is the matrix. Saturn is the cube. Saturn, in a sense, what I'm basically trying to put on here with this stuff is that there is 100% with the Saturn thing. It has some association with this dark mom thing, whatever that means. Like I said, we're getting more abstract now. So you know, if this doesn't make sense to you, that's fine, I guess. It doesn't entirely make sense to me either, but I don't think I'm wrong either. He was raised as a daughter. I think there's something to that too. The fact that it's like not trying to be step on anyone's toes like nowadays, you know. I'm just talking about the occult. I'm not talking about if you live your life like this or whatever. I'm not even saying an opinion on that. All I'm saying is there's something occultically, symbolically significant to the dude pretending to be the girl, basically. The dad taking on a role as like a mom. I don't know. Like, you can think of that or what you like. Make of that what you will. You know, I can't go into any more depth than that. So feminine, like she said, and you know, I guess the whole parallel it could have, it uses she, whatever, uses the illusion, which is a key, like, you know, key attribute to this thing, of the princess Guinevere to hide his repulsive appearance. So definitely a lot of this Matrix stuff has to do with illusions and deceptions and things like that. And association with the moon's power. That's why it was like a girl. So the moon is feminine, the sun is masculine, right? Mother moon, things like that. I'm talking about symbolically. I'm not saying the moon is a woman or something like that, but this is like occult stuff 101, 100%. Moon being a mother or a feminine symbol and the sun being a more masculine one. So think about what a solar eclipse is. And I already told you alone, the black sun, you should definitely look into that stuff. But think about what a solar eclipse is and put it with her name, that character's name, Dark Sun Guinevere, or Gwendolyn or whatever. A solar eclipse occurs when a portion of the Earth is engulfed in a shadow cast by the moon, which fully or partially blocks sunlight. So the moon is moving in front of the sun, and, you know, the mom's moving in front of the dad, basically. And, or I hate to even put it like that, but it's the feminine is overshadowing the masculine. And, you know, there's definitely some things to be said about, like, patriarchy, or, like, you know, I hate to even use words like that because it's been, there's such a thing as a tyrannical father, alright? I'll say that. I'll admit that. But I'm not talking, I don't want to be associated with any of these liberal groups or anything like that. I'm not even on the same wavelength as them, okay? So, but like, you have the moon blocking the sun, and this symbol, this black sun, one of the most important symbols in my opinion that you could ever look into. So I'll do probably more stuff. It'll come up in more of my videos. It always does, you know. But, you know, just think about it. The guy's pretending to be a girl. And that's another way to think about it. Rather than just the feminine overshadowing the masculine, you could literally think about it as a masculine wearing a feminine cover, right? That's another way to think about it, which is kind of what I was getting at. So, you know, make of that whatever you will. I don't, you know, it's just my view of things. I don't know. Like I said, we're getting more abstract now, so it's not as super down to earth. Lastly, okay, this isn't necessarily, like, principally it has to do with the Matrix thing, but I can't necessarily tie it into the feminine or to the mom thing as easily with this. But this is a sign from Planet Fitness, right? It's a gym that's known for, like, and if you work out here, I don't care, it's fine. I'm not saying you make the rules here or that you're a bad person. But look at this, okay, the lunk alarm, right? And this gear here, the fact that there's a gear, there's something to that. I'll just say that right now. I can't explain it to you, but it's something to keep in mind in case it comes up again. A lunk. This gym's known for supposedly setting up, like, an environment that's accepting of everybody, right? Which sounds, again, like this Matrix, Utopia, Dream World type fantasy, trying to create that. And this is the gym version of that. Communist gym, basically. Lunk slaying. One who grunts, drops, waits, or judges. Right there, or judges. Ricky is slamming his weights, so now it's giving you an example. Ricky is slamming his weights, wearing a bodybuilder tank top, and drinking out of a gallon water jug. What a lunk. So, you know what? There's a lot of things I could say about this. First of all, you need judgment. You need discernment. Judgment is not evil. People are different. Things are different. You make a million judgments a day. When you wake up, when your eyes open in the morning, you make a judgment on whether it's better or not to get out of bed or stay in bed. Every day. You make hundreds of judgments subconsciously and consciously every single day. You actually couldn't exist without being able to make judgments. Sure, you know, when people say that, they mean like don't walk around with your nose in the air acting like you're better than everyone. But some people probably are better than others, right? Like, you know, let's give an example of two polarities, and it's like, think about the most like low-life criminal child, you know, someone that messes around with kids, thief, murderer, versus like a guy that like is an asset to society, provides for his family, takes care, is a good father and husband. How are those people equal? How are they the same? They're not, unless you're crazy. But even like I said, multiple levels of analysis. Even bring it to the internal. Forget the external. Bring it to the internal. How could you? The only way you could ever better yourself is if you judged certain things about yourself as inadequate so you could change them. How could you better yourself? How could you identify what needs to be changed if you never judged? You couldn't. I hope that makes sense. I'm not trying to... This isn't a video about the utility of judgment, but this whole don't judge thing is a component to this mother matrix stuff. And I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. And it's another thing, it's ironic that, you know, someone who judges, what a lunk, right? And then right immediately below that, oh, he's slamming his weights. He's wearing a bodybuilder tank top. He's drinking out of a gallon water jug, which is literally the most insane thing I've ever heard. Like, I can maybe understand the slamming weights and the grunting. Even then, it's like, whatever, who cares, right? But, like, drinking out of a gallon water jug is, like, too provocative for you. Like, that's... And I'm not even some Mr. Macho Man myself, man. I'm just saying, like, that's insane that if you're, like, so triggered by someone drinking out of a water jug, like, I don't understand that. That sounds like an insane rule to have. What a lunk. So, like, someone who has those things, they're a lunk. They're judging. The people who always talk, that's what I'm saying, everyone judge, like, they're talking about, oh, don't judge. They are judging. Immediately, right after it says that, they're making judgments. I don't know how that's like how unself-aware do you have to be? And most of these people who say stuff like that, don't judge, have a lot of different opinions about a lot of people, and they don't even follow their own rules. So, you know, I just, again, the only reason that's in this video is because I wanted to point out, I wanted to make a connection principally that the don't judge philosophy ties into the Matrix, it ties into the communist thing, and, you know, that's it. Other than that, you know, I can't show you a picture with, like, it being like a mom that's saying that or something like that. Although something like that, examples of examples of that probably exist somewhere in, like, fiction or something. Oh yeah, then you just have judgment-free zone, right? So I hope some of this stuff made some abstract sense and also some very down-to-earth sense about basically, you know, an overbearing mother and, like, what that could mean symbolically and what it does to a person. Now I'm going to include some clips that aren't me talking. You're going to see something from Pastor Stephen Darby, and you're going to see something from Jordan Peterson. So you're probably going to hear them say a couple things that I have said, but pay attention to what they might even say it better than me. They're not going to really get into, like, you know, some of the more abstract stuff, but, like, they'll break it down. They'll tell you exactly what it is, and, you know, if you don't want to watch that stuff, that's fine, but the next good portion of this video is just going to be clips of those guys, and that'll be it. That'll be the end of the video. So thanks for watching, guys.
Okay, so the question is that the totalitarian forms that we've seen primarily in the past have been male, but maybe we're seeing something different now. I really don't think it's different. I think it's of of a common kind that's expanded in its dominion. So you imagine that there's an essential feminine pathology, just as there is an essential masculine pathology. And the essential feminine pathology Freud mapped out. It's the Oedipal mother. And the Oedipal mother is the mother that gets too close to her children, right? And intermingles herself with them to too great a degree that in her attempts to protect them undermines them fatally. And so there's a classic representation of the feminine in the West, and the classic representation is Mary. And here's one of the representations. It's lovely, and it's derived, at least in part, from the story of Mary and the snake in the Garden of Eden. And so Mary has her foot on a serpent, and she's holding Christ off to the side, like this. Well, that's exactly what mothers have always done. It's a biological portrait of human women, is they hold their infants out of the reach of the terrible serpentine predator. Obviously, that's what we do. Well, that's fine. But adults aren't infants. And neither are children. And if you treat them like they are, you undermine them. You pathologize them. You turn them into old infants. That's an ugly thing. And that's the Freudian nightmare. You know, and this happens in therapy very frequently. I mean, you can be tangled into a terrible relationship with your father. That's often either because he was absent, abusive, or tyrannical, something like that. But the standard pathology with mom is she did everything for you. Well, what's left for you to do? Nothing, including never leaving. Right. And that's the motivation, you know, for the woman who's nothing but protective mother. There's no role outside of nurturant of nurturer of infants. Well, you just keep them infants. They'll never leave. They might kill you one night in your sleep, but they'll never leave.
Connect back to what we're seeing in terms of identity.
Sure, sure. I mean, it's so comical watching the feminists, postmodernists in particular, rattle on about the absence of gender reality and act out the archetypal devouring mother at exactly the same time. For them, the world is divided into predators and infants. And the predators are evil and need to be stopped, and the infants need to be cared for. Well, that's what the mother does. But adults are not infants. And all you do is destroy them when you treat them that way, especially when they're adolescents and just starting to develop. You know, there's a rule that I attempted to abide by when I had small children, and the rule was, don't do anything for your children that they can do themselves. And that's annoying, that rule, because it takes you like 15 seconds to dress a 2-year-old, but if you let the 2-year-old dress himself, it's 15 minutes. Or 20 minutes, or half an hour, you chase them around the house. But if you let them learn to dress themselves, then you don't have to dress them anymore, and they can do it. And you do that with setting the table, and you do that with everything. It's like, no, it's okay, you do that now. Well, I care for you so much, let me do that for you. It's like, I don't care for you at all when I say that. I don't care for you at all. I'm going to stop doing everything I possibly can for you as rapidly as I possibly can. Say, well, that's great. That's how you work in an old age home. Do not do anything for the inhabitants that they can do themselves, because you rob them of the last vestiges of their independence, right? It's what you do when you're a manager. If you're a good manager, you make yourself superfluous by extending autonomy and independence to the people that you manage so that they can take over the whole job. You don't do that by doing everything for people. And you certainly don't do that by dividing the world archetypally and uncritically into predators, those who have more, and victims, infants, those who have nothing, and acting like all you can ever do is protect them. You don't protect, first of all, you can't protect people. You can only make them strong. That's it. You cannot protect them. You can make them strong, and then they can protect themselves. But then they don't need you. Right, and there's the underground pathological element of the devouring mother. It's like, never leave me. Here's the deal. I'll do everything for you. You just never leave. Right, that's sleeping with your mother. Right, that's the Freudian nightmare, right? You don't invite your child into your bed, right? You distinguish between them and you. You distinguish between them and your husband. and you facilitate their independence. A part of the reason why it's useful to have a mother and a father is because the mother has to fall insanely in love with the infant or she'd throw it out the window, right? Because they're insanely demanding and they're always right, right? Because the right way to treat an infant, especially before 9 months, is I'll do everything for you and you're always right and your needs take priority over everyone else's, and anybody that threatens you is terrible. Exactly right. But after, you know, once the kid is ambulatory and starting to be independent, that's the wrong attitude. The attitude then is, you know, get the hell on with it. And men who are less prone to negative emotion and less compassionate are much better at fostering that kind of independence. And so it's usually then when they step into the family and start playing with the kids, rough and tumble play, and pushing them forward and saying, you know, get on with it, you can do it, you can do it. And it's very hard for a mother to play both those roles because she has to fall so in love with her infant that it's difficult for her to be like universal caregiver and disciplinarian at the same time. You know, because the roles run contrary to one another. And so now women have entered the political sphere, right, en masse. And so they're going to bring their essential nature with them, all the while saying there's no such thing as essential nature. It's like, yeah, there is.
And be ye separate, saith the Lord. Who's them? Darkness. He's talking about darkness and light. See, we got that mentality. We got this big mama mentality. You know, the big mama mentality, they no matter how bad they are, they can come on in and get something to eat. And they, don't you say nothing about her. She's the 5th child by 5 different men. But don't you say nothing. Nobody can judge nobody. Because God know everybody's stuff. And it's the big mama syndrome. Love you to death. Love you to death. Because they won't tell you your true condition. Why y'all think everybody love Big Mama? Now, Big Mama on her own kids, she told them the exact truth. Grandkids, she lied. Baby, don't worry about it. God know your heart. You know your mama did that too. Big Mama ain't told what she done did, but she gonna tell what she told what to the grandchild what the daughter did. You heard what I'm saying? See, that big mama syndrome is the mentality that we have that has parented us to where nobody ever told us our true condition because big mama was rejected. And she didn't want you to be rejected. So she tried to cover you from feeling any emotional pain by not telling you the truth. That comes from growing up without true fathers. True fathers tell you your true condition. But see, when we grow up with Big Mama won't love, so she make you cake and cookies and use her food to get into your heart, and she needs love. She's really a junkie. She's the greatest enabler. She won't let you fall and hit the bottom because she wants to hold you up because she needs a little love. Say amen. Now that mentality is why we are where we are, why people can't see themselves properly. So then when somebody starts saying, no, you know what? You just a whoremonger. Well, I ain't never heard that because nobody ever dared to tell me.
And Freud believed that was universal. He believed that the reason the Oedipal myth was universal was because it was very difficult for creatures who had as long a history of dependence as human beings and who were born so helpless to develop an independent identity given the need for their protection across, an 18-year period. So Jung viewed that in a slightly more profound manner in some ways because he thought of it as a problem that transcended the mere family, because Jung believed that one of the temptations of consciousness itself was to hide from reality, and that you didn't necessarily need any parental interference with your development to hide your head in the sand from the true nature of reality like someone who was naive. So he believed that that was also an existential problem, and of course this movie picks up on that theme to some tremendous degree, because although Betty is very naive, part of that naivety is merely cowardice. She just doesn't have any life experience at all. And you see very rapidly in the movie that when she's actually presented with temptation, her facade of, you know, naive morality is eradicated instantly the second she's given any temptation. So she falls prey to the love affair. She hesitates not at all to break and enter. She ends up hiring a murderer. I mean, she's not a good girl, Betty, you know, Betty like the Betty in the Archie comics. She's not a good girl at all. She's just someone who's so inexperienced and clueless that she lives in an Oedipal dream world. And she thinks of Hollywood as a magical fantasy place where dreams come true, like they do for Cinderella. Now, Freud's observation of that was that the reason that the parents did that was twofold. One was that they were cowardly and unable to look at the world as it really was, and second, that their fundamental aim was to eradicate the independent strivings of their children so that they would never leave home, so that the parents didn't have to suffer from loneliness. So it's an ugly, ugly, ugly story, and this is partly why Freud is being met with so much resistance. There's lots of reasons, but he's absolutely right. I mean, Freud's basic Oedipal theory was that the most difficult thing that a human being has to do is to develop enough independence to break away from the maternal nest or the familial nest so that they can live an independent existence, and that there's multiple ways that that can be seriously interfered with, some of which border on incestuous. And the blonde woman in the initial parts of the movie, when she's seen off by her uncle and aunt, is basically Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. You know, she's raised somewhere by loving relatives, and the aunt and the uncle, or the older couple, play that role. They wish her well in her wonderful adventure into Hollywood, and she naively accepts their benevolence as, you know, an appropriate way of interacting with her. And of course, it's not appropriate at all. She's naive right to the bloody core. Whoever really were her parents did an absolutely dismal job of preparing her for reality. They allowed her to nurture naive princess-like fantasies that are so fractured and sketchy that they have zero adaptive utility, and they basically set her up for catastrophic failure. And from the Freudian perspective, that's an Oedipal story, because the fundamental lesson of Freud's Oedipal theory is do not let your theoretically benevolent caretakers delude you into naive faith. So in the Freudian scheme of things, the Oedipal mother, for example, infantilizes her son. Now, Freud read that as a familial pathology, and Jung read that as a mythological pathology, even though Freud did talk about Oedipus as a myth. And Freud's basic idea with regards to the Oedipal complex was that it's very easy for a mother to entice her son, but even more broadly, for parents to entice their children into a false sense of dependent security by helping them pretend that the world is much more benevolent and simple than it really is.